Welcome to Chronicle. In the world there are only 6 types of industry that act as a reference to the usefulness of every human being on Earth. Technically, therefore, each of us needs the manufacturing, textile, chemical, mechanical, metallurgical, construction industries, but the 7th, that is, the primary industry, suitable for survival on the planet is agriculture, from which livestock farming, fish production and therefore fishing, aquaculture, use of woods and forests and mineral extraction are extracted, which is the basis of any other existing industry. The counterweight of the economy was reversed when the 8th industry, the financial one, was born. The value of the use of bank leverage far exceeds the value of the products that nature offers us. This has heavily tilted the balance of economic stability, until it becomes survival. I'll give you an example. Suppose there are 100 people carrying a 500-kilogram log. It would mean that the weight of the trunk would be divided by 5 kilos per person. But if 3 people are carrying the trunk and the other 97 are not participating, then those 3 people are crushed by the trunk. The trunk represents the economy. The 3 people represent the people crushed by the weight of the leverage economy. 97% represents the missing turnover. The domino effect of systemic debt is a parameter based on the International Monetary Fund's estimates of global debt, which reached $195 trillion at the beginning of 2024. The ratio of GDP to world debt is increasing by 13% per year. From here on, the catastrophe is a horizon visible to the naked eye. The only countermeasure adopted by the central banks has been the accorpamento, which means that already in 1998 a professional cannot be able to self-manage without being associated with other companies. In 2003 most of the small and medium-sized companies were devoured by the big brands. To scale, the big brands are absorbed by the corporations. The corporations existing today, to live, they need to collaborate with governments, which are reduced by the power of sovereignty and self-management by central banks. At one time the West had only sovereign countries, then we called it a united Europe. The European Community acts under the direct order of the central bank. The 50 states of the land of the Indies were united under the name United States, with unified control at the Federal Reserve. England was made up of 4 sovereign countries, then it was called the United Kingdom, with total economic control in the hands of the Bank of England. The amalgamation of powers continues. In a sort of Pac-Man economy system, the United Arab Emirates followed suit. Some of the sovereign countries that had not joined were absorbed by the same banks but through the NATO program. When a company cannot pay its debts, the debt is bought. When a nation cannot pay its debts, exactly the same thing happens. States and companies are made up of people, so those who live on these continents have been bought. The United States of America itself, despite exponential growth, no longer belongs to the Constitution of the United States, but to the bank. The decision-making authority for the issuance of credit and per capita wealth is in fact established by the production of the dollar press. The decision of which banks to save and which to swallow has absolutely nothing to do with the power of the White House. Systemic debt, by definition, is a sliding process. Understanding the mechanism is easy. Let's say you are a farmer, and you own a chicken. The hens produce eggs. I sell the eggs, I have generated a credit. But if the costs of managing the eggs exceed the profit, there is no more margin of operation, so you hand over the management of the eggs to a larger company. If the profit is swallowed up by the costs of managing the eggs, you also sell the chicken. If the debt increases, you stop being a farmer and you also sell your farm. But if even this does not help you to generate credit, then whoever bought you the chicken and egg will be bought in turn, and the process continues, until you get to this building. If you look at a stock management screen on any day of the week, you'll see at a glance that some companies have matched better than others in a jungle of data and trades. If by chance you think you are exempt from the circuit, then you don't know why you go to work instead of self-catering. Ask yourself a question: bills, credit card bill, fixed costs, variable costs, do they leave you enough margin to be serene? If your answer is yes, you have a systemically risky loan. And if you have any international finance background, you know it's a constant risk. Of course you can't live with the constant thought of a currency deficit. We don't wake up in the morning saying to ourselves, I'm afraid my money has no more value, because the most common thought in mankind is the only thing that unites 99% of human beings. It's like making more money. It's the only way to make it is to belong to the system. a scaling process, hence systemic debt. You have to be aware of the fact that emerging markets have not been brought to light thanks to fund investments, but thanks to financial leverages, in a ratio of 1,000 to 1 means that, for every dollar invested the bank has put $999. In simple terms, what we call the new economy belongs to the banks from the roots. Election campaigns are born in the same way, political parties ditto, party newspapers follow the same pattern, and in the end governments, and those who merge them always act for the same banks. If by any chance you think you haven't understood a passage of this mechanism or it's finding it difficult for you to digest, I'll show you what you're looking at in the most direct way I can. What you are looking at now is planet Earth. The total value of everything that exists on this planet is broken down both on paper and in bank accounts by 5 offices, and they are these: the Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve Bank, the European Central Bank, Bank of China. Maybe you already know that there are 160 central banks on the planet. In more or less equal parts they belong. Mind you, I didn't say they work for, I said they belong to these 5 brands, 5 central banks, 5 entities authorized to print money in the world. 5 are also the fingers of one hand, and now that you know which is the hand that owns the planet, it would be necessary to understand whose body this hand is attached to. Each of these banks has only one president, and these 5 presidents form a committee, which takes orders from a single authority, but there will be a dedicated service to show you in detail what it is and why. If you are subscribed to Chronicle, you will be notified when the service is completed. The purpose of this video article is to make clear what the domino effect of systemic debt is, which has gone from doubt to worry, from worry to stress, from stress to panic, from panic to confusion, and finally this. A government economist for some reason found himself explaining to a homeless drug dealer who lived in the Bronx named Bob, what systemic debt means. Bob, he listened very carefully and tried to explain in his own words what he understood from this conversation. His outburst was, "So the world is going to shit." The economist admitted that he could never find a better definition of systemic debt. I'll try to give you yet another example. When you think of systemic debt, think of a mouse that runs. But the trousseau goes straight into the mouth of a snake, which will be devoured in turn by a crocodile, which will be devoured by a school, but the shark will be shot by a gigantic boat, and the boat will be bombed by an aircraft carrier, whose command is given by a government, who works for the central bank. I know it's very unpleasant to hear that, but the mouse in the example is you, it's me, it's us. The greater the amount of systemic debt, the sharper the line between slave and master. What they haven't calculated is that if you destroy everything around you, the only thing in the economy that will remain standing will also be the only thing visible, and only these banks will be standing, and the reason for your fight against the cost of living will be clear. You can see it with your own eyes. Already in the United States an absurd situation is occurring. Piece by piece, the middle class is disappearing. Not very late the United States will be divided between rich and poor, but not the middle class. The number of homeless, although we are talking about the country with the highest per capita wealth in the world, is increasing. On a monthly scale, systemic debt is drawing an increasingly clear line between rich and poor, between centralized capital and professional slavery. Debt sustainability is dying, the same debt that has crushed individuals, professionals, companies and governments. Systemic debt is constantly increasing. According to macroeconomic data, we are consumers, not producers. The problem is that those who produce consume more debt, and those who produce debt burn lives. You are witnessing structural changes in the economy, and you don't even realize it. The debt on the chart takes on a convex curve. You have to start taking note of the fact that that line on the screen represents your turnover, your salary, your purchasing power, your future and that of your children. The number of families in the world that can no longer support it is not decreasing, and non-solvency inevitably leads to being swallowed. According to the data coming from FMI, advanced countries are not yet in free fall but are unable to halt the rise in systemic debt. China alone accounts for nearly 3/4 of the rise in global non-financial private debt, and China aside, the private sector of Europe and the United States are undergoing strong consolidations. Google alone is merging an average of 2/3 companies weekly. Apple, Tesla, and many others are trying to make themselves safe by eating as much as possible. At the top of the pyramid, central banks are merging banking groups, and in these banking groups there are the accounts of the big brands. As we said, to date there are 5 banks that have managed to eat as much as possible. We have estimated that in the next 30 years there could be only 1 bank, 1 corporation and 1 government, and if this happened you would witness the fulfillment of the New World Order. Anyone who is not part of these 3 entities owning all the global assets will have no choice but to serve them. Few will find the message hidden in this video article, and those few will not stand idly by. I don't know from where in the Chronicle network you are looking at this report. Maybe you're watching us from Dailymotion, Facebook, YouTube or Chronicle, but then again, this is an article you've seen, read or heard on the internet, and you've thought that systemic debt is just another analytical and meaningless term in international finance. In reality, the term systemic debt is a report that is compiled in order to establish what happens from the moment of the decision taken by the central bank, up to the average consumer, passing through the government, small banks, businesses, professionals and finally the average consumer. And looking at all that data, you can see that a single war can cost as much as a nation's per capita fund. There is no war without debt. The system of countermeasures to overheating caused by factories in Asia causes a quarter of the systemic debt. The savage mechanism of enrichment through taxes has forced entrepreneurs to do the same. The acceleration of the volume of debt has dragged developing countries into poverty, and countries that had achieved economic stability have then regressed to a state of poverty. Greece and Venezuela being an explicit example. The only goal of monetary policy normalization according to the Bloomberg Commission remains the New World Order. 1 bank, 1 government, 1 corporation, 1 leader, 1 people and made up only of slaves. Now you know the domino effect of systemic debt, on a global scale. That's all from Chronicle.